My friends, when I look back on the journey of my life, on the unexpected roads I've walked, the unlikely places I've visited, and the profound moments that have shaped my understanding of humanity, there is one experience that stands out as something more than a visit, more than a diplomatic gesture, more than a symbolic handshake between cultures. It was something spiritual, something humbling, something that reminded me of our shared destiny as human beings. And that was my visit to the holy city of Makkah. Now I want to be clear, I did not visit Makkah as a tourist, nor as a politician seeking applause, nor as a man trying to impress the world. I went with respect. I went with humility. I went with the awareness that billions of Muslims from every corner of this earth turn their hearts toward this city every single day. And even though I was not there as a pilgrim performing the rites of Hajj or Umrah, I was there as a witness to something far larger than any one individual. Something timeless, something eternal, something that in its essence belongs to all of humanity. As Air Force One descended over the desert horizon and I looked out at the sweeping sands surrounding the region, I felt an unexpected stillness settle over me. It wasn't the silence of an empty place. No, it was the silence of significance. The same kind of silence a person feels when stepping into history, into a story already written long before they arrived. And as we approached Makkah, the landscape shifted from the vast openness of the desert to a city overflowing with life, with movement, with purpose. Even from above, you could sense something extraordinary. The Kaaba, black, simple, unapologetically profound, stood at the center like the heartbeat of the planet. Millions of people, dressed in white, circled it in an unbroken flow. It was unity in motion. It was faith given form. It was humanity expressing devotion not through words but through footsteps synchronized by belief. And I remember thinking, there is no very important person section here. No ranks, no titles, no privileged access. Kings, presidents, workers, farmers, scholars, parents, all are equal in this place. All wear the same garments. All walk in the same circles. All stand shoulder to shoulder as creations of the same God. That image touched me in a way few things ever have. It reminded me of why human dignity matters, why equality is not just an idea but a spiritual truth, and why humility is not weakness, it is strength. As we landed and drove toward the sacred precinct, I was surrounded by security, by protocol, by the usual machinery of a presidential visit. But inside my heart I felt something shift, something soften, something open. Because I knew that this was not Washington or New York or Chicago. This was Makkah, a place where the walls of ego fall, where the noise of politics fades, where faith becomes the language that binds us all. When I entered the Masjid al-Haram, escorted by scholars and officials who graciously welcomed me, the air felt different, cooler, yet charged with a kind of spiritual electricity. And as I walked through the marble corridors, hearing the low hum of prayer and the distant echo of footsteps circling the Kaaba, I felt myself slow down. My breathing deepened, my thoughts settled, and then I stepped out into the open courtyard. There it was, the Kaaba, the center of the Muslim world, the house of God. And let me tell you folks, no photograph, no documentary, no briefing paper can prepare you for how it feels to stand before it. It is not large in the way monuments are large. It does not tower like a skyscraper. It does not glitter with gold. It stands in its simplicity, and yet its presence fills the heart with awe. I found myself taking a breath so deep it felt like my lungs were trying to hold on to the moment, and as the call to prayer echoed through the air, rising above the city and settling over the people like a gentle embrace, I watched thousands of men and women pause, turn toward that sacred center and bow in unison. There was no division, no conflict, no noise of the world, just surrender. I stood there watching, listening, feeling something within me align, not with politics, not with power, not with ambition, but with the truth that we are all seekers. We are all travelers. We are all trying to find meaning in a life that is often confusing, often painful, often beautiful. And in that moment, I understood in a new way why Makkah holds such a place in the hearts of Muslims. Because it is not just a place of worship. It is a reminder of origin, a reminder of equality, a reminder that the human journey began with a single family, under a single God, guided by prophets whose stories continue to inspire billions. As I walked closer, the scholars accompanying me began to explain the history, the rituals, the significance of every direction, every structure, every movement. But I found myself speaking less and listening more. Because in a place like that, words feel unnecessary. The heart becomes the interpreter. I watched a father lift his young son so he could see the Kaaba. I watched an elderly man lean on his daughter's arm as he took slow, deliberate steps toward the courtyard. I saw tears in the eyes of people from nations that are often divided, standing together without suspicion, without rivalry, without barriers. It was a vision of unity the world desperately needs. Now let me tell you something. When you're president of the United States, you see divisions everywhere. Political divisions, economic divisions, cultural divisions. You see people fighting over land, over ideology, over identity. You see nations torn apart by differences that seem impossible to bridge. But standing there in Makkah, I witnessed millions of people from Africa, Asia, Europe, the Middle East, America, moving together in harmony. No one asked what language they spoke. No one cared how wealthy they were. No one measured the worth of the person beside them. They were united by something higher, and I found myself thinking, if humanity can be this united in faith, then surely we can find a way to be united in peace. As I continued walking, I had a moment that I will never forget. One of the scholars guiding me said, "Mr. President, every person who visits this place is reminded that they are small, not in value, but in the face of something greater." And that struck me. Because leaders often live in a world where everything feels big. Big decisions, big responsibilities, big pressures. But in the presence of the Kaaba, I felt small in the best way possible. Small in the way a person feels when looking up at the night sky and realizing the universe is vast, and yet here we are, alive, conscious, capable of love, capable of compassion. That sense of smallness did not diminish me. It grounded me. It centered me. It reminded me that leadership is not about standing above others. It's about serving them. It's about remembering that the power you hold is temporary, but the impact you have on the soul of humanity is lasting. There's something else I want to share. As I walked along the white marble floor, the heat of the sun softened by the cool breeze that passes through the open courtyard, I noticed something remarkable, how calm the people were. Millions of individuals, each dealing with their own struggles, financial hardships, illnesses, personal griefs, and yet they radiated peace. Because in Makkah, they were not defined by their burdens, they were defined by their faith. I saw men who looked like they had carried weights all their lives, walk with shoulders relaxed. I saw women whose eyes held stories of sacrifice and resilience walk with a quiet strength. And in their presence, I realized something profound. People are strongest when they are connected to something sacred. And I thought about America. I thought about the world. I thought about how so many people feel lost, disconnected, divided, lonely. And wondered what would happen if we could bring even a fragment of this unity, this humility, this peace into our daily lives. What would happen if nations treated each other with the same respect that the pilgrims show one another? What would happen if leaders remembered, as I was reminded that day, that every human being deserves dignity, because every human being is created by the same God? As I walked along the boundary, where only pilgrims may cross, I paused and took another long look at the Kaaba, and I imagined the prophets who walked here. Abraham building this structure with his son, Muhammad calling humanity to justice, compassion, and mercy. Generations of believers coming from distant lands on foot, on camel, on ships, all answering a call that transcends time. And I realize that every pilgrim who enters this place is walking a path already traveled by giants of faith. It is a path shaped by sacrifice and devotion, and it is a path that brings humanity back to its moral center. Before leaving, I stood in silence for a moment, just breathing, just absorbing. And as I did, I felt something shift inside me, a clarity, a calmness, a reminder that no matter how complex our world becomes, no matter how loud the noise of politics grows, no matter how divided our societies feel, the human heart is still capable of peace. Now, I didn't walk away from Makkah claiming to be a saint or a scholar. I walked away grateful, humbled, inspired, determined to do more to build bridges between people, determined to speak more honestly about our common humanity, determined to remind myself and others that faith, whatever form it takes, should elevate us, not divide us. My visit to Makkah reinforced something I believed my whole life, that the differences between people are real, but the bond that connects us is stronger, that the world changes when we choose understanding over judgment, that peace begins when we recognize the dignity of every soul, and that God, by whatever name you call him, invites us to walk a path of compassion. As I left the holy precinct and looked back one last time, I felt a kind of spiritual gratitude I will carry forever. I knew that this was not the end of a visit, but the beginning of a responsibility to speak truthfully about what I witnessed, to respect the sacredness of what millions hold dear, and to honor the unity I saw in that courtyard. And so, my friends, when I speak about Mecca, when I reflect on my experience there, I do so not as a Muslim, not as a Christian, not as a leader, not as a traveler, but as a human being who stood in a place that reminded him of the best within us. A place that showed me what the world can look like when we see one another not through the lens of fear, but through the eyes of faith. A place that taught me that humility is the gateway to wisdom. A place that whispered the truth that all of us, every last one of us, are part of a story that stretches far beyond borders, beyond politics, beyond time. And if the world could capture even a fraction of the unity, the peace, and the humility I saw in Makkah, I believe with all my heart that our future would be brighter. Our nations would be kinder, our communities would be stronger, and our shared humanity would shine with the same clarity that filled my heart on that unforgettable day. Thank you, and may peace be upon you. And as I returned to my vehicle, waving goodbye to the scholars, the guards, and the officials who had so graciously guided me, I felt a strange feeling settle in my chest, a mixture of peace and responsibility. Peace, because I'd witnessed something beautiful, something that brought clarity to the human condition. Responsibility, because once you witness such clarity, you can no longer pretend you don't know what unity looks like. You can no longer accept division as inevitable. You can no longer shrug your shoulders at hatred, intolerance, ignorance, or fear. In the days that followed, as I met with leaders across the region, as I shook hands with kings and presidents, as I listened to diplomats and scholars share their perspectives on the challenges of our time, a part of my mind kept returning to that courtyard in Makkah, the glowing white marble, the rhythmic movement around the Kaaba, the whispers of prayer carried on the breeze. Every conversation I had, every policy question I faced, felt grounded in a deeper purpose, the purpose of preserving human dignity. Because here's the truth. When you walk into the Masjid al-Haram and see millions of people moving with one heart, one intention, you realize that human beings are not meant to live in constant conflict. We're not meant to be trapped in cycles of fear or stuck behind walls of misunderstanding. We're meant for connection. We're meant for compassion. We're meant for cooperation. And that's not just a spiritual lesson. It's a political one. It's a lesson for nations, for communities, for leaders, for families. It's a reminder that unity is not something beyond our reach. It's something already within our nature. But like all things of value, it must be nurtured. It must be protected. It must be chosen. There was a moment late one evening, long after my visit to Makkah, when I found myself sitting alone in my hotel room, the lights dimmed, the sound of the city humming softly outside. And I thought about the Prophet Ibrahim, standing in that same land thousands of years ago with his son, laying the foundations of a sanctuary that would welcome humanity for general. I thought about the courage and devotion it must have taken to build something so simple, so humble, yet so powerful. I realized then that the greatest legacies in human history are not built on force or wealth or ambition. They are built on intention. They are built on values. They are built on a willingness to serve something greater than oneself. And I ask myself, what does it mean for each of us to build something sacred in our own lives? What does it mean to leave behind a legacy rooted in compassion, justice, and unity? Because you don't need to be a prophet to build something meaningful. You don't need to be a president to change the world. You just need to understand that every act of kindness, every effort to bridge divides, every attempt to listen before judging, these things too are sacred. These things too build a better future. In Mecca, people walk around the Kaaba in a circle, a symbol of continuity, of unity, of the endless cycle of life returning again and again to its origin. And in that simple movement, I saw a metaphor for humanity itself. We circle through generations, learning, forgetting, repeating, rediscovering. And at the center of our circle if we are wise enough to see it, is the truth that we belong to each other. I remember watching a group of pilgrims from multiple countries standing together, sharing water, wiping sweat from one another's brows, helping the elderly find space to rest. None of them knew each other's language, but they understood the language of compassion. And I thought to myself, if strangers can care for one another like this in Makkah, then surely neighbors can do the same in their communities. Surely nations can do the same on the world stage. The challenge is not that we lack the ability to unite. The challenge is that we often lack the courage to try. We allow fear to guide us instead of faith. Faith not just in God, but in one another. We allow suspicion to shape our judgments instead of empathy. We allow old wounds to stop us from building new relationships. But in Makkah, I saw a different model, a model of openness, a model of humility, a model of understanding that unity is not something to fear, but something to embrace. One of the scholars who walked with me that day said something I've carried with me ever since. He said, "Mr. President, people come to Mecca to be cleansed, not just of their sins, but of their divisions." And that made me pause, because it reminded me that true cleansing, true transformation happens when the heart opens. When the heart lets go of the grudges it carried for too long, when the heart makes room for forgiveness, even when the mind says forgiveness is difficult. I've met people on my travels who carry anger like a burden strapped to their backs. They believe that letting go means weakness. But in Mecca, I saw the opposite. I saw strength. Strength in humility, strength in surrender, strength in the willingness to stand before the Creator and admit that none of us have all the answers, that all of us are in need of grace. And if there's one thing I took from that experience, it's this: the world needs more humility. The world needs more moments where we look inward before we point outward. More moments where we pause before we react. More moments where we remember that behind every argument, behind every political stance, behind every cultural difference, there is a human being, a soul, a person who laughs, cries, hopes, dreams, fears, loves. I want to be honest with you. As a political leader, I did not always have the luxury of thinking in poetic terms. Policy is messy,